You know what's really infuriating about being the galaxy's favorite punching bag? It's not the invasions, the slavery, or even the fact that half the species think humans taste like chicken. No, it's the paperwork. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Voss stood in the middle of what could generously be called a diplomatic disaster. A 7-foot alien warrior princess brandished a sword that probably cost more than his entire education. The Zephyrian delegation was in the middle of what his cultural briefing had described, very optimistically, as a spirited disagreement over humanity's request for basic rights in their sector. So let me get this straight, Danny asked, tugging at his uniform and fighting back exhaustion. You want to resolve a trade dispute with a duel to the death. Why exactly? Lady Keith Wind Whisper. Yes, that was her real name. And yes, the translator insisted on the dramatic pause, tilted her chin with aristocratic disdain. Her battle silk robe shimmered in the artificial breeze of her personal atmospheric system. Because, of course, she had won. Your species has no honor, she declared, her voice carrying the same energy as a driver screaming at someone who forgot to use a turn signal. You negotiate with words instead of steel. You compromise instead of conquer. It is distasteful. Right, Danny muttered. So, because we prefer not to kill each other over shipping lanes, we're dishonorable. Got it. He glanced at his aide. Williams, note that down. Back home, they'll love hearing that civility is apparently a character flaw. The Zephyrian delegation stood behind their champion, like they just stepped out of a fantasy novel, gleaming armor, flowing hair, perfect cheekbones, the whole epic poetry about breakfast routine. Cathra's weapon wasn't a sword. It was practically an artifact. Runes glowed across its surface, pulsing with her heartbeat, catching the light in a way that was either divine craftsmanship or mild radioactivity. Your champion will face me in single combat, she continued. When I win, humanity accepts our terms for trade passage. And if we win? Danny asked, already dreading the answer. She laughed. A hurricane made of wind chimes. Lose to a human? Your kind has been in space for barely 2 centuries. We have perfected combat over millennia. Right. Nothing says advanced civilization like settling trade disputes with pointy sticks. He turned to his team. Any master swordsman hiding in the group? Maybe a few fencing lessons in college? No, just me. Technically, Danny had taken fencing. Realistically, it was because he dated a fencer for 3 months before she dumped him for someone with better prospects. Somehow, that relationship had left him as humanity's go-to diplomat for warrior cultures with trust issues. Life had a sense of humor. I accept your challenge, he heard himself say, before his brain could veto the idea. The Zephyrians exchanged looks, half admiration, half concern for his sanity. Cathra's elegant eyebrow arched. You would face me yourself, not send a warrior? Lady, I am a warrior, Danny said. Technically true, if you counted surviving diplomatic nightmares as combat. The duel was set for the next morning. Apparently, even alien warrior cultures believed in a good night's sleep before possible murder. The arena was exactly what you'd expect from a society that turned violence into opera. Crystalline walls, perfect acoustics, a crowd of nobility in their finest, let's watch someone die attire. Danny was given basic combat gear, which looked like medieval armor redesigned by someone who loved buckles. The sword, at least, was decent. Balance, good grip, only mildly cursed. Before we begin, Cathra called, voice resonating across the arena, know that you face a daughter of the Storm Peaks, master of the 17 classical forms, bearer of the blade of whispered winds. What titles do you claim human? Danny thought about his options, military service, degrees, endless customer service horror stories. Instead, he went with brutal honesty. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Voss, 3rd Diplomatic Corps, 2 political science degrees, certificate in conflict resolution. Honestly starting to regret that last one. The crowd murmured, not the usual warrior's boast. No lineage, no legendary weapons, no epic deeds. Cathra pressed. Lady, the greatest epic of my family is my grandmother convincing a cop it was his birthday to dodge a parking ticket. We're not a saga-worthy deeds bunch. He flashed a grin. But hey, I've got determination. And a charming personality. Don't forget that part. The duel began with ritual flourishes that felt more like interpretive dance than combat. Cathra moved like liquid lightning, every strike a masterclass in precision. Danny moved like a man whose combat training came from late-night action flicks. He dodged her first strike by half an inch, stumbled, and somehow parried her follow-up by sheer dumb luck. "You fight strangely," she observed, her blade weaving patterns with names like Moonfall and Serpent's Kiss. "Thanks. I think," Danny gasped, "I call it unconventional." Her training assumed opponents who knew what they were doing. Danny's entire strategy was the opposite. Act like someone with absolutely no idea what's happening. Shockingly effective. Cathra's spinning attack should have taken his head off. Instead, Danny ducked wrong, at the wrong time, in the wrong way, and shoulder-checked her in the ribs. "Sorry," he blurted. "Do not apologize," she snapped, regaining her balance with inhuman grace. "It shows weakness." "Right. Sorry for apologizing." "Damn it." The crowd roared with a mix of amusement and horror. Danny had no idea which. All he knew was that he was still alive. For the moment, through sheer skill, Cathra was faster, stronger, and infinitely more trained. The only advantage Danny had was that she kept expecting him to make sense. "Stand and fight like a warrior," she demanded, after he survived yet another near decapitation by tripping over his own boots and rolling behind a crystal pillar. "I am fighting like a warrior," Danny shouted back. A very confused, underqualified warrior with an excellent survival instinct. "That is not fighting, that is—" She paused, visibly hunting for the word. "Effective," Danny offered, darting out just long enough to attempt a counterattack that looked more like a desperate swing than a trained strike. She blocked it with insulting ease, but her expression said she was starting to wonder about her life choices. "You have no form, no technique, no honor." "Lady, here's the truth," Danny panted. "Most of life doesn't have form or technique. Most of life is just showing up and trying not to embarrass yourself too badly." She lunged a move that probably had a name like Storm Touch Vengeance. Danny responded with a style best described as panic flailing. Their blades clashed in a spray of sparks, and somehow, through divine intervention or the universe's love of slapstick, Danny twisted her sword into a bind. For one breathless moment, they were locked together, close enough for him to notice the scar along her cheekbone and the impossible depth of her eyes. "You are not what I expected," she whispered. "Yeah, I get that a lot. Usually right before I'm fired." And then she smiled. Not the cold warrior smirk, but something warmer, almost human. "You are either the bravest human I have ever met," she said softly, "or the most foolish." "Why not both?" Danny grinned. That's when it all went sideways. His grip slipped, the blade turned, and her pressure drove the edge across his palm. Just a shallow cut. The kind of injury you'd slap a Band-Aid on and forget. Except when his blood touched the steel, the sword lit up. Not Cathra's elegant blue glow. No, this was something rawer, wilder. Lightning crawled across the blade, carving new runes into its surface in lines of silver fire. Symbols that had not existed a moment ago. Cathra staggered back, eyes wide with something disturbingly close to fear. "That is not possible." Her own weapon answered, glowing brighter in sympathy, runes blazing like twin beacons. The light poured into the arena until shadows leapt across the crystalline walls like frenzied spirits. And then it happened. Every Zephyrian in the chamber collapsed to their knees. Not ceremonially, not with grace. As though their bodies had simply stopped obeying them. The entire delegation, the nobility, the priesthood, even Cathra herself, bowed before him. Danny stared at his glowing sword, then at the kneeling crowd. "Okay, this is new." The translator choked on static as Cathra muttered in her own tongue. Her hands shook as her weapon pulsed like a star. Danny said at last, summoning the full power of his diplomatic vocabulary. "Did I win?" One of the elders in ceremonial robes crawled forward, chanting in a dozen languages at once. Williams, pale and frantic, translated from his tablet. "He says you bear the mark of the first forging, that your blade has awakened with the blood of the ancestors' line, that you are—" Williams paused, voice cracking. That you are the heir of stars and the chosen of the ancient compact. Danny looked at his sword, still glowing like a portable reactor. Pretty sure there's been a mistake. No mistake, Cathra whispered, tears streaking her perfect face. The blade knows. The blood knows. You are what we have awaited. Lady, I'm from Ohio, Danny said. I'm bad at sword fighting. You've definitely got the wrong guy. The priest raised his voice so all could hear. The prophecy told of one from the distant stars. One who would wield the ancestral blade without training. One who would fight without form, but with courage. One who would unite our people under one banner. Danny opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again, because while he was sure there was some rational explanation, alien tech, mass hysteria, practical joke, the look in their eyes said logic wasn't going to help. Sir, Williams murmured at his elbow, I think we might have a situation. You think? Danny hissed back. Was your first clue the glowing sword or the army of kneeling aliens? Williams checked his tablet. If they believe you're their prophesied leader, then I just accidentally conquered an entire species through poor sore handling. Danny finished. Great. There's no manual for accidentally fulfilled ancient prophecy. No helpline. Just you, your glowing sword, and a crowd of people who think you're Space Jesus. Cathra rose unsteadily, her voice trembling with reverence. Forgive me, my lord. I did not recognize you. That's because there's nothing to recognize. Danny protested. I'm just a diplomat having a really bad day. The blade says otherwise. He looked down. The glow had faded, but the weapon was undeniably different, etched alive. The blade doesn't say anything. It's metal, not mere metal, the priest said reverently. Star-forged steel, blessed by the first makers, lost for 1,000 years, said to awaken only for the true heir. Okay, but funny story, Danny said, holding up the sword. I bought this yesterday, from your weapons master. He told me it was a ceremonial knockoff for tourists. Even gave me a discount because one of the gems was loose. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Entire cosmologies seemed to teeter. The blade chose to be sold to you, Cathra said at last, though her voice sounded like she was convincing herself. The prophecy works in mysterious ways. Or, Danny countered, your weapons master has a good eye for suckers, and I look like the kind of guy who'd overpay for shiny objects. Sir, Williams whispered urgently, maybe don't dismantle their religion in front of them. Historically, that ends badly. Danny exhaled. Fair point. The galaxy was littered with ruins where first contact had gone wrong, because somebody thought it was clever to explain why the locals' faith was nonsense. Look, he said, raising his voice to the crowd. I appreciate the whole chosen one thing. Really. But maybe we could table the religious revolution and, get back to the trade agreement we were supposedly dueling over. Cathra glanced at the priest. Rapid, heated words flew between them. At last she turned back, voice solemn. If you are truly the heir of stars, then the old treaties mean nothing. The ancient compact takes precedence. Danny pinched the bridge of his nose. Fine, I'll bite. What's the ancient compact? The priest straightened, robes glowing faintly in the lingering light. The first alliance, the bond between our people and the makers, a pact older than empires, a promise that when the heir returned, all nations would kneel and the stars themselves would change course. The priest explained that the ancient compact had been a mutual defense and trade agreement, promising protection and prosperity for both sides. But when the first makers disappeared, everyone assumed the compact was void. Let me guess, Danny said, raising an eyebrow. Humans are descended from these first makers? The priest admitted the prophecy wasn't clear. But your blood awakened the blade, he said, and the blade only responds to those carrying the bloodline of the ancients. Danny stared at his hand, the cut already closing. Ordinary human blood, ordinary ancestry. Farmers, accountants, people skilled at avoiding military service. And what exactly does this ancient compact involve, he asked, though he was fairly certain he didn't want to know. Cathra answered promptly. Full military alliance, unrestricted trade. Technology sharing. And she hesitated, glancing away. A marriage alliance to cement the bond between our peoples. Danny blinked. Marriage alliance? It is traditional, she said defensively. The heir is meant to marry into the royal house, to unite our peoples under one banner. He looked around the arena, expectant faces everywhere, all eyes on him, like he'd just been drawn as a grand prize in some interstellar lottery. Williams muttered something about interspecies diplomacy and the probable reaction of the State Department. You know what? Danny finally said, I think we need a recess. The next few hours were a blur. Emergency communications with Earth, frantic attempt to figure out exactly what he'd gotten himself into, and desperately trying to stay alive emotionally while being hailed as the savior of a warrior species. The Zephyrian provided a secure conference room, though Danny suspected it was more arguing with the prophesied savior is impolite than actual courtesy. Tell her I'm still working on my position, Danny muttered to Williams. Also, is there a protocol for accidentally becoming the Messiah in the diplomatic manual? I checked, Williams said. Closest thing is a footnote about avoiding religious customs that might be misinterpreted as divine endorsement. Helpful. The door chimed, and Cathra entered without waiting. She'd swapped her armor for something that was both formal and practical, like a collaboration between a fashion designer and a weapons engineer. We need to discuss the ceremony, she said without preamble. What ceremony? Danny asked, already fearing the answer. The ritual confirmation of your status as heir, she replied. Tomorrow evening, the Planetary Council, Allied Worlds, everyone will be there. How many worlds? He asked dryly. The Zephyrian Confederacy covers 47 star systems, she said proudly. Once word spreads, they'll all want to renew their oaths of allegiance. Williams choked. 47 star systems. Modest, she added, clearly proud. Though trade partners will surely want new agreements. Danny slumped in a crystalline chair, designed by sadists masquerading as designers. Lady, I think you're overestimating my qualifications. How so? I've never managed anything bigger than a small diplomatic mission. No interstellar political experience. And my personality is better suited to middle management than messianic leadership. She studied him with that piercing focus again. You faced me in combat, knowing you were outmatched. You fought with honor despite having no training. You showed respect for your opponent while defending your life. Those are the qualities of a true leader. Lady, those are just the qualities of someone stubborn enough not to quit and polite enough not to panic. Sometimes, she said with a small smile, they are the same thing. Another knock, and more Zephyrians in fancy robes entered. The pattern was obvious. The fancier the clothes, the more complicated the conversation. Your Highness, one said, bowing deeply, we have received communications from the outer worlds. Word of your awakening has spread quickly. How quickly? Danny asked nervously. The High Council of Meridia declared a day of celebration. The war chiefs of coast offer their fleets. And the banking guild of Nexus Prime, the official pause, clearly uncomfortable, prepared an economic proposal. The banking guild? Danny repeated. Thorough, wealthy, significant support, Cathra added. Williams leaned in. Sir, if we handle this right, we could secure the largest trade alliance in human history. The economic benefits alone? Danny whispered. Yes, sir, but also pretend to be an alien messiah for maximum advantage. Danny sighed. The assembled Zephyrians stared with hope, reverence, and what looked suspiciously like religious fervor. Outside, the plaza teemed with cheering crowds. What if I say no? He asked. Admit it's all a misunderstanding and leave? Silence. Funeral-level silence. The prophecy states the heir will lead us to a new golden age, the priest said. If you are not the heir, either the prophecy is wrong or the true heir is still out there. And in the meantime, Danny added, you're stuck waiting. There's another possibility, Cathra said softly. Perhaps your role is different. Not to rule, but to guide. Help us find our path to this golden age. Danny considered this. Much better. Advisory role. No military policy. No interstellar taxation headaches. What would that look like? Honor council, she suggested. Advise the Confederation. Share your knowledge. Guide diplomatic relations. In return, protection, partnership, and marriage alliance. Her cheeks darkened. Negotiable, he thought. Some tension lifted. Williams chimed in urgently. Reports are coming in from other diplomatic missions. The Galactic Trade Council, Stellar Defense League, 6 major militaries, all want humanity's position on this new relationship. Officially, we're evaluating. Unofficially, the Defense Department thinks we just solved our security problems for the next century, and the Trade Commission is calculating the benefits of preferential access to 47 star systems. Danny rubbed his temples. And they want me to do it exactly? Not mess it up, Williams said. Helpful. Another chime. A younger Zephyrian entered with a tablet of crystallized light. Priority communication from the hegemony, he said. Danny froze. He knew enough galactic politics to know the hegemony was trouble, aggressive, expansionist, and obsessed with manifest destiny. What do they want? Cathra asked, carefully neutral. They're concerned about a new human-Zephyrian alliance, the Zephyrian said. Danny looked at Williams, who was making the face of someone who just found a cockroach in their cereal. That sounds ominous. The hegemony controls over 100 star systems, Cathra explained. They see strong alliances as obstacles. If they think humans and Zafrans are forming a military partnership, they might act before we're ready. How much of a threat? Direct confrontation? They could overwhelm both of us. Danny groaned. Fantastic. First prophecy, now interstellar diplomacy, now imminent galactic war. Could this day get any better? Our people separately are strong, one of the officials said. Together, however, we might not just survive, we might thrive. Williams leaned in. The Confederacy has advanced defensive tech. Humanity has demonstrated remarkable innovation in tactics, and with the economic resources of our allied trading partners. He trailed off, letting it sink in. Sir, this isn't just about trade. We could be on the verge of a new galactic superpower. Danny moved to the window, gazing at the plaza below. The crowd was singing, voices weaving harmonies that were at once alien and beautiful. Children ran between adults, enacting dramatic sword fights, and what looked suspiciously like reenactments as duel with Cathra. You know the funny thing, he said. I came here thinking I was negotiating shipping rates. The universe has a sense of humor, Cathra said, joining him at the window. Not always kind, he admitted, but definitely humorous. She was quiet for a long moment, watching her people celebrate. Perhaps the prophecy was right about one thing, she said slowly. You may not be the leader we expected, but you might be the leader we need. Even if I have no idea what I'm doing? Danny asked. Especially then, she replied. Leaders who think they know everything make dangerous mistakes. Leaders willing to admit limitations and ask for help. Those are the ones who actually help people. Danny nodded. Not a ringing endorsement, but honest. And after the day he'd had, honesty felt like a luxury. All right, he said, turning back to the room. Here's the plan. Williams, send a message to Earth. Let them know negotiations are proceeding. But this has evolved beyond trade. Yes, sir. Lady Cathra, he continued, I want every detail on hegemony, military capabilities, recent actions, likely responses to news of our alliance. If we're doing this, we need to be ready. And I want to talk to your weapons master, he added. The room froze. If I'm going to be the prophesied leader of a warrior culture, Danny said with grin, only slightly tinged with hysteria, I should probably learn how to use a sword properly. Can't have the heir of stars embarrassing himself in the next ceremonial duel. Keith's laugh rang like warm wind chimes. That could be arranged. The next evening's ceremony was everything Danny expected and twice as surreal. The amphitheater was adorned with thousands of crystalline lights, reflecting patterns meaningful only to those fluent in Zephyrian symbolism. Representatives from dozens of worlds transformed the event into a hybrid of religious festival and diplomatic summit. Danny stood on the central platform in what he was assured were traditional robes of the air, a human nightmare of embroidery and excess. His sword, now resplendent in its ornate scabbard, hung at his side. Remember, Cathra whispered, Speak from the heart. Symbolism matters more than words. Right. Symbolism, Danny muttered, staring at thousands of expectant faces. The priest began the ceremony with a blend of prayer, historical recitation, and what may have been a recipe for soup. Danny caught fragments. Ancient promises, star-born champions, an eternal cycle of glory and renewal. When it was his turn, he stepped forward, forcing confidence he didn't feel. "I won't lie," he began, drawing a ripple of surprise. Most prophesied leaders start with grand speeches. A few days ago, I thought I was negotiating shipping rates. I had no idea I'd accidentally fulfill your ancient prophecies. The crowd hung on his words. "But here's what I've learned," he continued. "The most important things happen when we don't expect them. The greatest opportunities often come disguised as problems. My people and yours, we're more alike than different. We want safety for our families, prosperity for our children, and the chance to build something better than what came before. Sometimes the best way to protect what we love is to stand together." Approval murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I can't promise to be the perfect leader your prophecies describe," he said. "I will make mistakes. I will make wrong decisions. What I can promise is this. I will listen, learn, and do everything I can to help both our peoples build a future worth having." He drew his sword ceremonially, catching the light. The blade seemed to glow with inner fire. "I accept the role of heir, not as ruler, but as servant, not as conqueror, but as partner. And I promise that as long as I draw breath, our alliance will be built on respect, shared sacrifice, and the understanding that together we are stronger than apart." The crowd erupted in cheers that likely registered on seismic equipment. Danny lowered his sword, trying not to look as relieved as he felt. The rest of the ceremony blurred together. Ritual blessings, hundreds of officials pledging loyalty, and endless speeches. By the end, Danny's feet ached. His face hurt from smiling, and he had inadvertently agreed to at least 3 things he didn't fully understand. But watching the crowd disperse, still singing and celebrating, he felt good. Different from what he expected, but good. "So," Cather said at his elbow, "how does it feel to be the heir of stars?" "Exhausting," he said. "Terrifying, overwhelming, completely surreal, and kind of amazing. Your people really know how to throw a ceremony. Wait until you see the victory celebration after we deal with the hegemony." About that, Danny added, growing serious, "Williams briefed me. They're mobilizing a fleet." Catherine nodded grimly. "Confirmed. 3 battle groups moving toward border systems. They're not subtle. How long do we have?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they posture before attacking." Danny watched the celebrating crowd below. Children dancing. Couples laughing to music like colliding wind chimes and thunderstorms. "We're really going to fight for this, aren't we? You having second thoughts?" "No," he said, surprised by a certainty. "No, we are. These people deserve better than the hegemony's boot. And humanity, we've been searching for allies for decades. Allies who see us as partners, not prey, even if it means war." He thought of the hegemony's occupation policies, absorb species and abandon worlds. "You know what?" he said finally. "I've spent my career avoiding conflict, finding diplomatic solutions. That's important work. But sometimes diplomacy fails. Some people only understand force. If the hegemony wants a fight, we'll give them one. Smartly. Together." Keith smiled, the same warrior smile from the arena. "Now you're starting to sound like the heir of stars." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of military planning, diplomatic coordination, and what Danny privately called emergency leadership training. The Zaffron military was professional and efficient, but assumed everyone shared their ritualized combat culture. Danny's days were filled with fleet deployments and strategy briefings. Evenings, Zapperian history and customs. Nights, lie awake wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The good news, the Admiral said during a strategy session, the hegemony relies on overwhelming force, not tactical innovation. Conventional battles are their comfort zone. And the bad news? Danny asked, they have roughly 3 times our combined fleet strength, superior firepower, and a reputation for not taking prisoners. Right. So we're screwed unless we're smarter, faster, and better prepared. The key, Danny realized, was to not fight the battle the hegemony expected. The Admiral's expression suggested that this was easier said than done. Our defensive positions are strong, he warned, but they're willing to accept heavy casualties. They'll eventually break through. What about mobility? Danny asked, can we avoid a direct confrontation? For a time, the Admiral replied, but they'll target civilian populations if we don't engage them. Danny studied the tactical displays, trying to see patterns that more experienced minds might have missed. Probably hopeless. What did a diplomat know about space warfare? But sometimes an outside perspective revealed what experts overlooked. What about their supply lines? He asked. Cathra and Velter exchanged glances. Heavily defended, Cathra said slowly, attacking them will be seen as an escalation. Lady, Danny said, they've already escalated by bringing 3 battle groups to our front door. Besides, hitting their supply lines isn't just strategy. It's a message. We won't play by their rules. Dangerous, Velter warned. Could go very wrong very fast. Sitting here and letting them pound us into scrap metal at least has a guaranteed outcome. Williams looked up from his tablet. Sir, incoming from Earth. Fleet Admiral Harrison wants our timeline for Terra naval support. How much support? The 5th Fleet is standing by. 47 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts and a full carrier group. The room went quiet. Even by Zephyrian standards, that was formidable. Your people came prepared for war, Beltar observed. My people came prepared to protect their new allies, Danny corrected. There's a difference. What followed was a whirlwind of planning. Fleet movements, supply calculations, tactical assessments, and enough contingency strategies to fill a library. The human Zephyrian alliance had distinct advantages. Superior mobility, better intelligence, and the advantage of fighting on home turf. More importantly, they had creativity, something the hegemony didn't anticipate. The key, Danny said during a final strategy session, is that we fight our war on our terms, with our strengths, not theirs. When the battle finally came, it wasn't a cinematic spectacle. No dramatic speeches, no single heroic acts, no last-minute reinforcements. It was a grinding, methodical campaign, for days of careful maneuvers and logistics over glory. The hegemony fleet arrived on schedule, deployed in predictable formations, and attacked exactly the targets intelligence suggested. And that made them easy to avoid. Zephyrian hit-and-run tactics, paired with human electronic warfare, turned an expected conquest into a frustrating game of cosmic hide-and-seek. Every time the hegemony massed at a major target, they found empty space and automated defenses. Every time they spread out searching for the Allied fleet, coordinated strikes hit their weak points before vanishing back into the void. Our admiral is frustrated, Cathra reported. Good, Danny said, studying the displays. Frustrated people make mistakes. And the hegemony did. They targeted civilian populations, a logical tactical decision, but a catastrophic strategic one. The moment orbital habitats around Zephyr Prime were attacked, neutral systems rallied. The Galactic Trade Council imposed sanctions. The Stellar Defense League offered technical support. Even the isolationist Menuri Collective condemned the aggression. Sometimes, Danny observed, the best way to win a war is to let your enemy defeat themselves. The final engagement was anticlimactic. Cut off, surrounded, and isolated, the hegemony fleet retreated, but not without warning. This isn't over. The Empire has a long memory. So do we, Danny replied. The difference is we're not alone in remembering. The victory celebration was everything Cathra promised. Entire systems declare holidays, parades, feasts, and ceremonies stretch for days. You realize, Danny said to Williams during a break, we'll probably deal with hegemony retribution for years? Yes, sir. But we also have the strongest alliance humanity has ever formed. Economic and military benefits included. Danny paused, trying to put his feelings into words. This morning, I was a diplomat. Tonight, I'm the co-founder of a new galactic power. Big career change. Williams smiled. You've handled it remarkably well. I've been making it up as I go since I walked into that arena. Honestly, I still have no idea what I'm doing. Respectfully, sir, I don't think anyone does. That's what makes it interesting. Later, after the celebrations, Danny found himself in the palace gardens with Cathara. Crystalline trees cast shifting patterns of light, distant music and laughter filling the air. "So," she said, settling onto a curved bench, "how does it feel to save a galaxy?" "I didn't save the galaxy," Danny protested. "I helped negotiate a mutual defense pact and got lucky in one battle." "You united dozens of species in common cause," she said. "You helped us stand up to the biggest military threat in the region. You created something that didn't exist before." He laughed. "Sounds like saving the galaxy to me." He admitted, sitting beside her, careful with the formal robes. He said, "You know the really crazy part? I think I'm starting to enjoy it. Ceremonies, politics, interstellar threats, the feeling that what we're doing matters." Catherine nodded. "That's real leadership. Not power or recognition, but knowing your choices affect lives." They sat in silence, watching alien stars wheel overhead. Music, laughter, and joy echoed from the city. "The marriage alliance," she said suddenly. "We never resolved that part of the prophecy." Danny's face warmed. "The council has decided political marriages are outdated," she continued, but her tone suggested the conversation wasn't over. "However, personal relationships between allied leaders are diplomatically beneficial." "Diplomatically beneficial," Danny repeated carefully. "Shows commitment, more than convenience." She paused. "Also, I may have told a few people, I find your leadership style intriguing." "Intriguing how?" "You're not what I expected. Most leaders either try to prove strength or hide weakness. You just are." "Lady, what I am is a guy who stumbled into the biggest responsibility of his life and is trying not to mess it up too badly." "Exactly," she said, smiling. Not a warrior smile, not a diplomat's, but something personal. "So, would you be interested in exploring the diplomatic benefits of a personal relationship?" Danny thought of interspecies romance, diplomatic complications, and the fact that his life was already surreal. "You know what?" he said finally. "Sounds diplomatically beneficial all around." Her laugh was like warm wind chimes. "Besides," he added, "someone needs to teach me to use this sword properly. Can't have the heir of stars embarrassing himself." "No more duels," she said firmly. "You're too important." "Promise." "I promise." Danny leaned back on the bench, relaxed for the first time since it all began. Somewhere, the victory celebration continued, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, he was just a guy from Ohio who somehow became the heir of stars. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal. The future waited. Danny figured he'd handle it as he had everything else, making it up as he went along. And so far, that strategy was working. 6 months later, the Terran-Empyrean Alliance controlled 49 Star.